Hi, and welcome back to More Than a Lumpy Jumper. It's mentoring month, so Bobby and I are going to be chatting about mentors, the whys, the hows, some alternatives, and some of the hurdles. There's even a little love letter to my sister Fran. So come and join us for being in, as well as a great support system.
In honour of this being National Mentoring Month, we thought that we would spend this episode talking about mentors. Needless to say, as well as there being a level of tangents, it may well be that we expand that out to take a look at a wider look at where a mentor sits in a support system. You know, what is your support system to have your well-being, be that mental, emotional or physical, being in fine fettle? But we'll start with mentoring. So it is mentoring month, as I say, January, where we are recognising and honouring the contributions that people make to being mentors and mentoring programmes, but also having the conversation so that it may well have you feeling encouraged to become a mentor to somebody else. So, Bridget.
Yeah, I'm glad you made that caveat, Bobby, simply because actually my experience of mentors is really limited. I was trying to think back, and I certainly didn't have an official mentor. I suspect you didn't either in the military. There certainly weren't mentors, or I didn't have one at the bar, although I guess maybe a pupil master or pupil mistress might be viewed as a mentor of sorts. So I've been an official mentor to one person, and I have had an official mentor for a short period of time through female sort of networking organizations that have mentoring programs. So I had a mentor through Albright. I'm just about to get another one through another female business networking organization called Network Ireland. So yeah, I haven't had a real experience of official mentors, albeit I know that I've had sort of unofficial mentors and I've been an unofficial mentor.
I think I have a similar experience. I was thinking about this for the recording. I have to say, if I think back, there were probably teachers that where the word was never applied to.
Yeah,
were definitely people that were much more than their academic subject.
Yeah.
That I would go and talk to about all sorts of other things, who were really nurturing, the whole package. And so I would say that I probably did then. Interestingly, by the time I then wandered into the army, I was trying to think, did I have any there? And what I do know is that, let me say two things. I would say, yes, I did have one. I'm going to do a now shout out for him, and that is Les Wood, who was the squadron commander when I was first a troop commander. And the difference was that Les was an officer, but a late entry officer. So he had a whole lifetime of being in the military, having gone all the way through the ranks, and then had been properly recognised by becoming an officer, a late entry officer. And I found myself really gravitating towards him and the gang of late entry officers.
Yeah.
Because I didn't find mentors in the mainstream of it. I think there is a level, and I'm going to say this because I think that this sometimes can still come up now in this day and age, but there is a level where people are being so ambitious that they wouldn't ever contemplate giving their time to looking after anybody else, because it was all about their ladder. And yet the late entry officers were a bit like, well, I don't need to be too worried about my ladder because I've sort of made it and I'm doing this. And they really were glorious people who were paying it forward by making sure that the likes of Dimwit here actually got better at what she was doing. So as a massive shout out to Les, he was absolutely amazing at making sure when I was going off the rails emotionally a lot of the time, I could go and scream and shout in his room and he would put me back together again in a way that the mainstream part didn't. I suppose I've been reflecting on that because in this day and age, leaders, how do you make sure that you are getting the support system that you need, but you're making sure that you're the support system for others rather than being that self-absorbed human being where I couldn't possibly give time to actually be looking after somebody else. So there's question one within all of this with regards to support systems. I also think the other thing that I was reflecting on, I wasn't very good at asking for help. So I didn't go looking for one. And now I am very pleased to think that I have unofficially mentored people during my career, latterly, I think, because again, I probably was one of those people going, oh my God, how do I fit this in as well? But also officially for an HR director at the moment, where it's just, she can bring me anything and we can talk about it and I can give of my experience. It's very different from the coaching conversation because it's just like, look, I did have a similar situation to this. This is what it might look like. But I'm really mindful that they're not looking for development of skills. They just want the sounding board so they can actually be working it out for themselves and to be themselves, I think, a lot of the time is my sense of it. And there's probably more than that, but that's where I'm starting from because I'm quite new to it too.
Yeah, I think that I have a similar experience in terms of, there were a couple of LE officers and one of my staff sergeants who probably were the closest to what you might say mentor in terms of guidance, and maybe not me going in and screaming in their rooms, but more just advice and sort of gentle guidance. And didn't really get that from the other officers and teachers. There's definitely a couple of teachers who influenced me and encouraged me and nurtured. I like that word, nurture. I think that word nurture is really important in mentoring. And then I sort of look at throughout my career, and again, it as a feminist, it makes me sad that the majority of the really influential people, especially in my more junior career, were men. Although maybe that's not so surprising in the sectors that both of us were working in, who have supported me and really given me space and encouraged me to be who I am, whenever I was the person who really was pushing against barriers or shaking at gates where I was being prevented from entering. When I would make a fuss about that, they were sort of proud father-like figures going, yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And even when I remember one time when I was in the OTC and I'd gone on a TA weekend, so it was all the TA, not just the university drinking clubs. And there was in the military, and you know this, but I'm just saying this for anyone who listens who's not in the military. In the British military, certainly, there are specials to arms schools, and there's a school of infantry. We went to the school of signals, and they're all based in various places normally around Wiltshire. And there was a TA school of infantry course called the Platoon Commander's Battle Course. And there was also a regular version of it. And we'd gone to the School of Infantry as a big group of TA just to do some looking at things go bang and get excited about weapons. And I realised that all of the guys in my OTC were able to go on this TA PCBC. And I wasn't, even though I was going to be a platoon commander the next year in the OTC. So I kicked off in a meeting with the brigadier at the end of this weekend, was doing his old pat on the back, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was egged on to stand up and ask why women weren't allowed on the course. And to my surprise and to everyone else's surprise as well, he turned around and said, yeah, there's absolutely no reason why. I hope to see you on the next course, Second Lieutenant Forster. I think I was an officer cadet at the time, and I was due to do Sandhurst, the TA Sandhurst, that summer, and then in the September the course started. So I kind of, as I have a tendency to, sort of drop myself into a commitment that I wasn't actually really expecting to have to do. But when I came back, there was so many reports from people and actually some complaints from some of the more junior officers saying, Bridget made a big scene and blah, blah, blah. And so he called me in and I was really nervous and he just was grinning all over his face. And he said, I hear you've been making waves again, Bridget. And he said, it's brilliant. Well done. It's a long time coming. I hope that you enjoy the course. And of course, I did go on the course thinking that other women would come along with me. And I was one woman amongst 80 men on the course, and lots of the TA guys were very, very upset.
Oh, boo-hoo.
In fact, one of them turned around to me and said that I'd ruined it for him.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And I was super lucky that a lot of the other OTC kind of rallied round and supporting me when I was going. I had some fairly horrible experiences during those 2 weeks, but I passed that course and the guy who had told me that it wasn't worth doing didn't.
Good. I'm very glad to hear it. Karma is a bitch. Called Bridget.
Yay. So that Lieutenant Colonel Guy Sale made a massive impact on my life in never ever saying that I shouldn't be fighting for more. And he really set that in motion, that I've sort of lived by that for the rest of my career, various careers.
Yeah, clearly. of dropping yourself in it, asking the question that gets yourself into whatever next. I think that's amazing. And I agree with you. I think that and it sounds like the same as that I had with Les, that whilst it may well not have been the official title, that backup to stretch yourself into things that you haven't done before. I was only in my early 20s, and there's a long backstory as to how I ended up being a young officer in Headquarters Squadron as Les's second in command. Long story, but mainly because of an awful boss, I got moved. But he was, of course, the family's liaison officer, like the welfare officer. So he had me involved in all sorts of really quite stretching situations that I had no life experience for. But he would make me do it. So soldier goes AWOL because he was in debt to the tune of £20,000. We find out that he's got himself involved with some burglar who he's living in their house, fencing stolen computers. The police get called. He then jumps out of a top floor window, breaks both of his legs.
Yay!
So we're able to then catch up with him. And so Les said, well, you can go and deal with it. I was like, what? The guy had also been offered voluntary redundancy. So I went and said, look, I know he's done all of this stuff that's wrong, but he's been given redundancy. The best thing we could do is let him have the redundancy money to clear his debt and start his life again. Now, I was 23, 24 years of age. I have no idea where that came from in my head, but I do remember the commanding officer acknowledging my level of maturity. Not something I get acknowledged for very often, but on that occasion...
Even now, Bobby.
Exactly. But on that occasion, he did. And it was probably the thing that sort of like saved me as a young officer. I found what I was really good at, which was as around people. It got nothing to do with signals or with, wiggly amps and signals equipment. It was all to do with people. And I think, Les spotting that and making me go and do something which I'd never done before. But, there's a reason that a path turns into a path. And I think that's what good mentors do, whether they're called that or not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the things that, because you are a coach as well, people often conflate the two, mentors and coaching. We know that there's a difference, but particularly, I guess, when I've been in conversation with managers and leaders who maybe aren't so familiar with those concepts, will say, oh, yeah, I'm mentoring or I'm coaching. And maybe this is a time to just have a chat about that, what the difference is, as far as you're concerned.
I had a sneaky suspicion you might ask me that when we got into this recording. I was trying to think about the best way to explain it. So one of the things I came across while I was doing a bit of research for this one was something from Harvard Business Review about being a successful mentor. So let's start with that. By a guy called Anthony Tian. I may well not have pronounced that correctly, so apologies if that's the case. He says a few things. One is put the relationship before the mentorship. So I think that's the same as coaching, because it's very much about establishing that relationship of trust where anything can be bought. So I do think that there is something similar there. Then he says, focus on character rather than competency. There's that flipping word again. Every time I go looking for something, it keeps jumping up and biting me in the face. But anyway, let's go with it.
You love competencies, don't you,
Oh,
Bobby?
I do so much. Focusing on character rather than competency. So where I see that, I think, in the distinction between mentoring and coaching, is that with coaching, you are often having people practice, for want of a better word, new competency, new habit, new skill, whatever it might be. And you're putting them into situations where they may well be leaving old habits behind and choosing new ones. So you could call it competency, you could call it habit. But I think what they're saying there is focus on character rather than competency, is that what you're actually trying to establish with a mentee is that you're helping them with something that they actually want to do in business. But you don't want to be saying to them, look, when it happened to me, do it like this. You're having the conversation about your experience, but supporting them in allowing them to be themselves in what they're doing.
Yeah. I have always looked at sort of some of the differences being coaching tends to be for a fixed period, whereas mentorship is supposed to be a sort of longer term relationship, although that not always.
Yeah.
And coaching often is about a particular issue, whereas mentorship is more about sort of being the whatever role you're in. Although, I mean, they overlap a lot in many ways.
They do.
The one time I've mentored, and when I've unofficially mentored, it is, you're right. I mean, sometimes it is about saying, hey, I've done it, this sort of thing has happened, and sometimes this has worked for me. Whereas you wouldn't, in coaching, you don't sort of give those sort of prompts.
Yes.
It's all about finding the solution yourself.
Or the top tip. Yeah, the top tips or whatever it might be. Yeah, and so, I'm with you. I think they do blend together. The other couple of things that he says is that I like this one, because I think it may well be that this can happen if you are mentoring in the same organisation. So these next two, I think, may well apply if you're in the same organisation. But he says, shout loudly with your optimism, keep quiet with your cynicism. So again, there is a level of, you may well be feeling a particular way about the organisation, but you've got to be optimistic for the mentee. I mean, that equally applies to coaching. The difference is often with coaching is that, well, for me anyway, I'm outside of an organisation. I don't need to be involved in whatever's going on there because I'm just dealing with that one person. Whereas with mentoring, especially in programs, you are often part and parcel of a system or the organisational system.
Yeah. Also, one of the things that I'm really aware of is that you kind of need a wardrobe of mentors.
Yes.
And maybe this will bring us into some of the discussion about sort of support networks, because you need them for different topics and maybe at different stages in your career. It's not just a matter of having one mentor. And also, there's a subtle difference in terms of sponsors. So people who will be your cheerleader on a particular issue, particularly for things like promotions. I'm not a great fan of having a mentor who is your boss, because I think there's issues there. But looking at different elements to, as I said, a wardrobe or a library of mentors, stroke coaches, stroke supporters, stroke sponsors, to be able to help you find your way.
Completely agree. Because the fourth thing, to your point about not having your boss as your mentor, the fourth thing that he says is be more loyal to your mentee than you are to the company or organisation. And I think that points directly to what does this person need rather than what does the organisation need. And again, from the coaching perspective, you are attempting to support somebody in their journey, which can cause trickery when you're wanting to coach the person, but realize that you're actually probably coaching their manager as well, because
Yeah.
the outcomes you're coming to may well be very different to the ones that the manager thought you were first going to start with. I mean, that's happened. That's happened to me. But that person needs to be at the forefront of that. But I think that you can be a step removed as a coach in a way that, especially with mentoring programs within organizations, you've got to be really clear about the boundaries with that.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Bob, because that's been a real bugbear for me previously in organizations, humanitarian organizations that I've worked with, where people go, oh, yeah, we're going to set up a mentoring program. Or I've heard my colleagues in management roles or leadership roles, leadership inverted commas, but actual management roles, who are going, oh, yeah, I'm a mentor. And they put it on their, they put it out there. And I'm just a bit like, yeah, but you're their boss for a start. If you're actually mentoring, there's supposed to be an agreement. When you're in a coaching relationship, there's an agreement, but also there's supposed to be one as a mentor to understand how often you're going to meet, how you're going to meet. What is it?
Yeah.
Again, this idea of I'm going to be able to mentor you on this area, but this area is not. And I'm going to be busy in April, so we're not going to be able to sort of get down to things. If that's not going to work for you, maybe I can put you in touch with someone else who will be able to help you with that issue in the month of April. And I'm always really nervous when organizations go, yeah, we're going to set up this mentoring thing. You're like, well, okay, so what's the agreement? How are you going to oversee this, particularly in the humanitarian context? Because I may be listening to a 50-year-old guy who's decided he's going to mentor his 23-year-old young female program officer. There's a massive disparity in power. They're in the field, away from anywhere else. Who's got some oversight in terms of if something becomes just the mentoring ship doesn't work for whatever reason, where's the protection for this powerless young person who's just come into the organization to be able to say, I don't want my boss to mentor me anymore. I don't want to have to spend time with him. It's feeling creepy.
Yeah.
And then the converse, because, interestingly, some of the stats say that, 75% of executives will credit their success to mentors. 90% of employees who have a career mentor say they're happy at work. So mentoring is really, really influential in success and happiness in the workplace.
Yes.
And so it's got to be done right. And I have also, when you look at particularly mentorship is brought into organizations as a solution to gender and diversity issues to try and increase representation of women or representation of underrepresented groups. And one of the big issues is, understandably, that, middle-aged men often would feel weird going up to a female, obviously not my colleagues in the humanitarian context who have no problem at all about it, but generally feel very, very nervous about approaching a talented female employee and going, should we talk about mentoring? And some of the research into when mentoring works and when it doesn't, when it can actually make a difference in underrepresented groups, is that if the organization places that woman with that man, then the man and the woman feel much more comfortable about it. Because the reality is, unfortunately, that often, and it may be changing now, but again, the data at the moment suggests that women with male mentors are often very, very successful. And yet men are unwilling to offer to be mentors to women. And I get that there are very, very powerful arguments for having women mentor women in lots of circumstances. One, simply because actually the mentor relationship is beneficial also to the mentor. And it's an indicator. If an executive is a mentor, they are going to be also viewed as more successful.
Yes.
Because otherwise, why would they have a mentee?
Absolutely. I absolutely wish I'd had more opportunity
Mm.
or given more time to officially be a mentor in the past. I think I have been. I'd like to think that people who have worked in organisations know that they could come and ask me. It's a bit like you're saying about the situational. What do they need? They would come and ask, and I have done that in a less than an official way. And at the moment, I am somebody's mentor, and the relationship is strong. So I think with the things that you're saying is, I'm surprised to hear that organisations pick who goes with who, because I think there needs to be a freedom of picking who you need. So when it comes down to it, it's a bit like you're saying about this wardrobe or a suite portfolio, whatever you want to call it, of people that you call on in a support system. What is it that you actually need? Or do you know? Because then it's the conversation about, well, let's find out what you think that you need, and then we can help you put you with the right person.
Yeah. One of the issues with underrepresented groups is that often they do not ask or have the confidence to ask for a mentor.
Right. Okay.
A nice white middle-class boy from public school will probably already have, some contacts, etc., etc. So my issue really is more about how mentorship is arranged or organized and managed within an organization. One, in terms of actually just having boundaries so that there's a mentorship agreement.
Okay, understood.
That it's not just a matter of the old boys network coming into play where, and I've been guilty of it too. When I've done an official mentoring, it's been with people that I have gone, I resonate with this person. And I know they're already talented and they're going places. And so I can help them give there are other people who I'm a bit like, oh, I don't want to. And, then they get left on the shelf. And so I think that there's an issue about the organization, how mentors are allocated. I think the point was it's simply that men often, and not always, but many men feel uncomfortable if they were then to approach a woman to say, I would like to be your mentor. It's easier for the organization to identify that that woman would benefit from that male mentor.
I see. Yeah.
The other thing that I really think is important when you're planning a mentoring program is to train your mentors. So there needs to be some onboarding, one for the mentees so that they understand what this is all about, what mentorship is, but also for the mentors, because so I've got another article off HBR, and this one's about a concept called bridging mentors. This is a lot of research that's been done into gender diversity and inclusion, where the idea is, yes, obviously you place someone from an underrepresented group with a more privileged person, but often they don't understand the hurdles that the person from the less privileged group is going through. And so they'll be giving them advice about, well, it's easy, just go and do this. And it backfires because they don't understand the context in which their mentee actually lives and works.
Yes.
Training the mentors, who are often from a more privileged group, to understand some of the hurdles and the cultural contexts of the people that they are going to be mentoring really helps, because they are then supposed to be bridging this gap in privilege or opportunity without just going, oh, it's easy, I did it, how difficult can it be? Come on. And even if you don't have that sort of privilege gap between the mentor and the mentee, or the opportunity gaps that there have been, I think that there's a real issue with just making sure that there is some training so that mentors understand what is and is not appropriate.
Yeah, setting the parameters for it. I also wonder as well, and I know that this is potentially biting off more than an organisation can chew, but when you think about the number of people rattling around in an organisation, and there'll be a small proportion, I imagine, most of the time, who will make really, really decent mentors.
Yeah.
Which means that there probably won't be enough to go round.
Yeah.
And I would really like to see them having the sense to looking further afield to external organisations and seeing where that cross-referencing can happen as well. Because the fact is that if I'd have known or been part and parcel or been asked to be part and parcel of a mentoring program, I'd have then said there's probably 4 or 5 other people that don't work here, but I would identify and recognise as great mentors who would be able to support this organisation if they were willing to. And I think that sort of enrichment from that perspective as well, I think would be really quite powerful and help with the matching and relationship building.
Yeah, I completely agree. Because sometimes it's too close. And it really does depend on the context, obviously, before everyone gets their knickers in a twist. But of course, sometimes it is more appropriate to have someone a little bit further away and outside of the organization, not even because there's not enough mentors within the organization. I think that business networking organizations that provide mentoring opportunities are great. It's often where women look if they are struggling to find appropriate mentors within their own organizations. Looking within your sector, sometimes there are sectoral networking organizations. So you at least want to have someone who's in your area to be able to talk about whatever it is, whether it's pharmaceuticals or STEM or HR. I think that can be really, really helpful. And maybe your point about the fact that often within the organization, there may not be enough. That is the big shout out to people to consider it.
Yeah.
Even if they feel they're not ready, to consider doing some training to see whether or not it's something that might be a good fit, because it's good for your career too. And there's the issue of reverse mentoring. I know that there are organizations where the CEO is being mentored by someone from Gen Z to understand. So he's down with the kids, but also to understand some of the technological advances, all kinds of things that
I love
that we can all learn from each other.
Yeah.
And actually, for me, I view the mentoring relationship as mutually beneficial. So if it is only what can I give to my mentee, often it's a one-sided relationship. It's difficult to maintain that.
Yeah.
But if it's both ways, then that's a I'm going to use the word rich because I was mocking the word rich earlier. It's a richer and more sustainable relationship, particularly if mentoring, some people have a mentor for years and they may have other mentors around in their library, but one or two that are there for years, and you can't maintain that if it's always one person giving.
And one way. No, absolutely not. No, I mean, that's not nurturing. The whole thing about a relationship like this, similarly to the coaching relationship, is that it should nurture both. One may well be more in the driving seat than the other, but it's a two-way thing. I think as well, as you're talking about all of the other external places to go seeking mentors, I'd like to shout out to anybody who's actually listening to this episode that if you know of good programs or mentors or whatever it might be, that we actually share that in our comments on the LinkedIn post that we'll be writing about this, to actually broaden that to others. Because I think sometimes people can be a little bit lost. They might know what they need, but they don't know where to go and reach out for it. And that's the tricky bit. But maybe we could actually be a support system for a wider context here by actually helping each other out with that.
Yay.
Which brings me very nicely, from a segue perspective, to the wider support system.
Yeah.
So if I said to you, Brigado, who's in your support system, mentors, coaches, or whatever else, what have you got in your support system?
I was thinking about this because weirdly, I anticipated you might ask me that.
I'm getting good at this.
Or that it was going to come up at some point when I was getting like, oh God, I don't know if I know enough about mentors to be able to talk for an hour with Bobby.
Not done badly.
So I'm going to expand it to supporters and, things like accountability buddies and all of those things we were talking last week about, making our intentions and making our commitments, and that often having someone to hold us accountable is important, and a mentor or some other form of support network can do that. So I was thinking, over the years, before I joined the UN, I did a lot of sailing, and there was a really close group who I am still, I would view as very dear friends who I sailed with. So I'll call them the cows. even though most of them don't live in Cowes, but, I would associate them with my Isle of Wight people. And they've gone through, I was going through my divorce from my practice marriage, and they've seen me sort of go through all of that. Then there's a Bristol. When I moved to Bristol, there was a group that became my Bristol support network through when I used to do CrossFit. Looking at me now, you wouldn't tell, but I used to do lots of sort of outdoorsy CrossFit stuff. Some beautiful, beautiful friends who still are very, very close to my heart and are part of my support network. Then there's the culture vulvas, as they are now known, who are women, including yourself, who
Indeed
were at Sandhurst with me, and we've sort of kept in touch on and off, but recently have been sort of we've sort of reignited our sort of connections. And I'm working on it in Ireland. It's always hard when you move around, and I've been really lucky that those sort of three main groups have hung on, or I've been able to hang on to them as I've been moving around, and they're ones that I still, keep in touch with. We share jokes, we understand, we share a sense of humor, we've shared all kinds of experiences. So, and then I guess I've got a little Australian group as well who sort of broke off from some of the other groups and escaped, but I'm still keeping hold of them. So yeah, I've got some lovely and a really nice mixture of men and women, mostly my age, but some are in their 40s, so young spring chickens.
Love it.
And how about you, Bobby?
So I too was thinking about this, and I think to begin with, it made me a little sad, and I'll explain why. Because I think when I was going through my 20s, I sort of like lost touch with people. I lost touch with people from school. Then I lost touch with people in the military. The people that I'd been really close to at Sandhurst. I seem to disappear off the face of the earth to large swathes of people that I'd known until I got back into my 30s, and I'd had Ella, actually.
Yeah.
And I think for a long time, I had the story of them having left me. When in fact, I think that there was an awful lot for different situations and feeling a bit hurt about stuff that I was the one that did the disengaging. And I cannot tell you how glorious it has become since I realised quite how important a support system actually was when I got into my mid to late 30s. And that has been building. And I think it's built even more so in this last year as an independent, because what I realised was that with leaving work, when I'd been quite reliant on the support systems with, from work, I was having to conjure that up for myself. But so that it's been a number of different forces going on. But, the fact that we are so much, that culture vulvas group are now so much more in contact with each other, and the laughs that we've had this year, I've forgotten how much, you're a group of people that I love, and that, that I could call and ask for anything. So I'm a bit soppy now, but yeah, there's that. I found it with really good school friends again, who are really very important in my life. I've kept really strong friendships with some people that I've actually worked with. They weren't just colleagues, they became really good friends, and you better all be bloody listening because you know who you are. My family is an enormous support network, all of them, and that's been forever, but I'm very, very reliant on them some of the time, some more than others, but they're fantastic. I have a coaching community. There's a shout out here for the HR Geeks squad that I'm now part and parcel of, because they have resurrected my love of HR in this last year with being thoroughly irreverent, if I can actually speak. Jesus, sorry, Michelle. Irreverent. I think they call themselves feral some of the times as well, but we have such a hoot there, but really are such a great support mechanism for each other when HR can be really shitty a lot of the time. And this is the moment that I am going to say wham, and I am still okay with Oh, and actually, I shouldn't be saying that because it will have been and gone. They were telling me that I had to use the word wham in one of the recordings because of last Christmas. But it will have been past Christmas now, so you're going to have to edit all of this out. We'll leave it in as the spurious rantings of somebody talking about the support system. Up to you. And then I have, like you said about the library or the wardrobe of different things that you actually need. So I've rejoined the Military Wives Choir, so I get to sing, which is so good for my soul once a week. I've got gangs that I go and watch rugby with, so I can chant and scream and yell and commiserate if the team don't win. But there's all of that I find is part and parcel of the support mechanism.
Yeah.
When I went reading about it as well, though, the other things that I think we may well have forgotten, because we talk a lot about people, but pets and nature, and we've both talked about that, are part and parcel of people's support systems as well. So when you actually stop and think about it for a while, those moments when you think that you might be alone, I know wholeheartedly that I'm not.
Yeah. And that's, something to be forever grateful for, I think. I have followed a very similar path to you, and that's probably why we resonate so well now as well. In that, during my 20s, I lost touch with lots of people, and it was around about my mid 30s where I started building those sort of really close friendship networks again. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it in terms of sadness. I think maybe because I've probably blocked out. It's just like I've taken a whole chunk of my memory and it's just gone. So I don't really think about it so much. But yeah, all of the joy that comes from the silliness and the love that's sort of given completely without anything expected back is it's just amazing to me. There are times where I, just have to stop and think about how lucky I am to have such an amazing groups of people who, for some reason, love me. And you're right, I have quite a small family, but my sister and I, although we fought like cats and dogs when we were in our 20s, properly not fans of each other at all. My sister is one of the most amazing people, and I love her with all of my heart, Fran. But she's an amazing support to me, and I hope that I am an amazing support to her. I try to be. I know that I'm absent a lot, overseas a lot, so up until recently, so I haven't always necessarily been physically there for her. And of course, my husband, who's ever patient and puts up with his just mutters crazy wife in the corner while I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing, or just comes and pats me on the head because he hates when I cry. And he just sort of pats me on the shoulder and he goes, there, don't cry. Do you want chocolate? Yes, I want chocolate. Why are you asking? Give me chocolate. Yeah. And my lovely little cat who's just doesn't care about me at all, but for some reason brings me some sort of joy.
Until they need feeding.
That was why she was crying. She's been crying, and I've realised it's because her bowl was empty.
Well, that whole thing about support systems, the first question being, what do you need?
Yeah.
Well, the cat needed feeding, and she reached out to ask for it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about the animal kingdom. They will say categorically what they need. Children do too. And we're really bad at it. And I think that's what I was reflecting on, that there were so many times I needed help when I was in my late 20s. I suppose the thing that tipped it in the other direction was having Ella and realizing that I couldn't work full time and look after 3 children, etc., without starting to learn how to ask for help or building support. And so that was the first sort of like practice run of actually making friends with other mums in nursery and at the school gate, which felt really weird to me. And yet I've got some really lovely friends from that group as well, but I just wasn't used to it. But it's a bit like we say, commitments and practice, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And I'm so relieved for that, because within this year, as I say, some of the new groups that I've come across to be part of my support system and really been so incredibly generous when you're starting out as an independent has been glorious. So I am a firm believer in going through the discomfort of asking and reaching out, because it pays dividends in the long run.
But also, Bobby, it's a really important behavior to model as a leader.
Yes.
To bring it back to leadership, not wanting to sort of parrot you, but yeah, it's I'm very aware it's one of the things that I really struggle. It's not one of my strengths, but it is something that I've realized that not only do I have to learn to ask for help for me, but I also have to learn to do it as a model for the people in my team.
Yes.
Because if they don't see a leader who can ask for help, and they don't see that modeled regularly as a normal behavior, it's really difficult for many people to then go and say to their boss or to other people in the team, I am struggling, or this isn't working for me. How do I do that? And so many mistakes are made in teams, dreadful mistakes, because people are afraid to ask for help or afraid to say, I don't know how to do that. Can you show me?
Both are perceived as signs of weakness, when in actual fact, I think that they are two of the most courageous moves.
Yeah. Ending on that, I think, courage, modeling, support networks, acknowledging that support networks are important, and that one of the reasons they're important is they are there for you to ask for help. And it's a great thing to do.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you have something wise to say at the end of this episode.
Well, I don't, but somebody called Anna Barnes does. So I have a quote for you. And the quote is this: your support network is the solid ground from which you can propel yourself upwards.
Beautiful.
Your support network is the solid ground from which you can propel yourself upwards. It's another one I love.
Awesome. Thanks, Bobby.
Hurrah.
Bye.
Thank you. See you again. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Why don't you check out our website, morethanolumpyjumper.com, for more information about us and access to all the resources. If you need a speaker or facilitator, our contact details are on there too. Next week, we're joined by HR and burnout maven Kelly Swindler to talk about burnout, how to avoid it, how to recognise it, and how to recover from it. In Being with Kelly Swindler. See you then.